Hello, I am Elena Kraus, and today I will make you my presentation about Stop the Sun and the film Platoon. Index. Okay, in the first part, I will answer 4 questions, and then you can see my bibliographies. Okay, make a comparative chart between Terry's father and Chris, explain how the two characters could share similarities or be different. Okay, I think the two characters share a lot of similarities. Okay, the most important of these similarities are both fought in the War of Vietnam, both saw friends dying in the war. The squad of both were attacked. The attack was different, but both were attacked. Both were very young when they go to the war. Both were traumatized, and I think Chris can have the Vietnam syndrome like Terry's father. They were one of the few survivors of the war. Both say, metaphorically, that they will always be in Vietnam. So they think that Vietnam will be always in his life. They think they would die in Vietnam, but they did not. They would be understood only by the other veterans because the other persons didn't like Vietnam, and both were and are patient and quiet. Okay, differences. I think differences is a little more difficult because we didn't know a lot of things about a lot of information about Terry's father, and so a lot of the differences are more suppositions that are really things that is brought in the history of Terry's father. Okay, the first and most obviously difference is that the story of the Terry's father happened after the war, and Chris' story passed during the war. Another difference is Terry's father was the unique person of his troop that survived, and that's happened not in the Chris troop because not all but a few of his friends survived the war. Other thing is, I think Terry's father didn't think a lot of during the war, but Chris make big reflections. Okay. Terry's father showed himself like a person without hate, but we see Chris had experienced devastations of hate when he shot somebody that was innocent. Okay, our thing is, Terry's father didn't speak about a war idol, but Chris had a war idol, they was Elias. Okay, Terry's father we can suppose that Terry's father went to the war because of obligation, but Chris goes as a voluntary. Terry's father doesn't care about what the other says, but we can see that Chris gets carried away by social pressure. And the last difference is Terry's father is well physically, but we can think that in the last fight, Chris was hard and can be physical difficulties all his life. Explain with concrete events from the film how Chris developed as a character from the beginning to the end. Okay, in the first moment, I think we see that Chris was scared, lost, and didn't know anything about war. And a good example of this is when Chris camped in the jungle and was totally tangled with the trees, and when Chris was totally scared with the snake in the jungle. But I think an important thing that we see in the first moment is that Chris had hope. And the example for this is that he brought cards for his grandmother. Okay, after 1 week we see Chris didn't like more war. He say war was not a good thing, but he still have hope. He still brought his grandmother. Okay. A very important moment in the development of the character of Chris is the ambush. His first ambush. Because in his first ambush, he understands that all is learned on the way. And an example of this is that Chris didn't know what make in an ambush, and he pack a lot of things in his bag that wasn't necessary, and we can see he didn't know what he was making, but he learned that on the way. Other thing that we see that in this moment Chris understands is that the justice is what the men with more power thinks. And an example of this is when the men of more power think that the shield of fall asleep was from Chris. So the shield was for Chris. And didn't matter when the reality was that was Junior the person that fell asleep. But after all this, Chris still have hope. He say he is waiting some good of the war. Okay. After this, we can see that Chris go to the central and begin smoking, and that I think that we can see so that Chris say make what the others say, so social pressure. Okay, and in the end, and in the village scene, we can see that Chris learn and understand a lot of things. And the most important things that Chris understand in this moment was war made you lose your own humanity, and that see Chris when he see when Burns went totally violent and killed a lot of persons that were that was innocent. Other important thing that Chris learned in this moment was that they fought in the same side and between them. And a good example of this is when he said the rivalry that give between Burns and Elias. And I think he see that that's the war, and the most important thing is that he are a group and they fight in a union, but that wasn't so. And other thing that we can see in this moment of Chris is that the only thing that he want is leave the war. And it's a big development because in the first moment he come as a voluntary to the war. And in the end, the last moment, we see that Chris is traumatized. He says he will always be in Vietnam. And he's sad because he see that a lot of his friends must stay in Vietnam. And yes, I think that this situation is not a beautiful situation. Okay, make a prediction of what Chris' life will be like in the future after the events he has live in the Vietnam. Okay, I think that the life of Chris after Vietnam will be very difficult. I think the first thing that will be difficult is he must recuperate from the wounds of the last fight. And I think that's can be more difficult when these wounds leave aftermaths. That's yes, because these aftermaths can mark all the life of Chris. Other situations that can happen in the future is a prediction that I make from the last moment from the film when Chris said he would ever be in the war. That shows us a possible difficult situation because this sentence shows us that he is traumatized. And so I think he must receive help in the USA to can work his problems, to can work his Vietnam syndrome. And I think other thing that can happen is that when he come back, he would go and visit his friends. So like Kim. And I think he would stay with hope and wait. His friends, they must, or they can't come back from Vietnam. And then other situation that I think would happen is with his family. I think his family, or that thing with his family will be will be very difficult because I think his family wouldn't understand totally what he liked. But I think he can have a special good understand because his father and grandfather go through the war, and so I think that can be good because they love something, or they live a war and they can understand a little bit more Chris. And I think the most important thing is When Chris can work his trauma, and yes, I think he can build a family, have a woman, have kids. But I think when he didn't work his memories of the war, he can't live more, or he can't live anymore. He will stop his life because Vietnam, and I think that is an option, but it's not a beautiful option. Taking into account the story of Terry's father, and Chris explain how Stop the Sun and Platoon could teach the reader and the audience something meaningful about experience like war. I think this film of story can learn us a lot of important things. Okay, these things are, we can understand all the problem. We can't understand all the problems, but we can help all the people. War marked the life of the peoples. The people that live war would have war always in the system. We must understand that war is not beautiful like what we see in action films, and I learned that with this film. Okay, we must understand that war is not only about moment, so that's a memory for all the life of the persons that live the war. Okay, the film tells us a story of a group of friends that are in the war, and I think that show us that we all are humans, and doesn't matter the money we have or the race that we have. We can find superheroes in the real life. That I learned that in this film because we can see Elias. Elias is a hero of the real life. Okay, the violence has always a reason. I learned that with Burns, because Burns was very scared and traumatized because the war, and I think that is the reason for his violence. Other thing that I learned is that people can make all to survive. He can kill persons, make horrible things. Okay, I learned the decision of work or traumas is us, or this the decision belong to us. I learned that all can change in a second. We can have something a second and not more in the next. Okay, I learned that the human is the most dangerous animal because they can hurt himself, can hurt other humans, other animals, and the nature. But I think the most important thing that I learned in this film is we can always help someone. And bibliographies. Okay, there are my bibliographies. Thanks.